kind of like you, the near death stuff and the philosophical stuff I think is really strong. But
yeah,
wait,
I think,
Braxton, you think the near death stuff is wrong when like 95% of people who die report no experience whatsoever?
that's a bit like if we're all wondering whether Australia exists. You say, well, there's a billion people that have never been to Australia. Well, okay, but if one person really has, then Australia exists. So at the end of a really long panel discussion, I had a little bit of a tussle with my good friend Chris Date about near-death experiences and whether they are evidence for an immaterial soul. Now, there's a couple of terms that you'll need to know going into this so that you can get the most out of it, and I think it's a fun discussion. First, you might hear us refer to NDEs. Now, that means near-death experiences, specifically ones in which people demonstrate a knowledge of facts about what was going on in the operating room or elsewhere while they were unconscious in their physical body. Many Christians think the soul accounts for this. Chris is a physicalist. Christian physicalism is a position in which there is the physical body and it will one day be resurrected, but there is no immaterial soul. So what about these near-death experiences if there is no soul? Well, Chris offers precognition as a possible explanation for evidential near-death experiences, what we're calling NDEs. Precognition in this context is the view that the brain can bring together information about future events, or in this case, present events for which the unconscious individual was not present or was not conscious. And with that, let's jump in.
but I think overall, I would have problems with their worldview that we have not discussed.
Well, yeah. This helped me in that regard, but I'm kind of like you, the near death stuff and the philosophical stuff I think is really strong. But
yeah, wait, I think, Braxton, you think the near death stuff is wrong when like 95% of people who die report no experience whatsoever?
Yeah, because I think there's truth in what I think it's truth in what we saw, what was said before, which is those numbers mean nothing. The question is, did you have one veridical evidential experience or more? Because if you did, you have to at least say, right, are the dead conscious? Well, sometimes at least.
I think that's fair. But as we pointed out in the debate, there are other explanations that dualists never even want to consider.
I agree. And precognition as one of those possibilities, you said, I know that may sound wacky, but you said it's no more wacky than the soul, but I don't think the criticism is that precognition or other explanations like that are wacky. The concern I would have at first is it seems ad hoc as an explanation. I would want to look at the evidence and say, well, hold on, what is the most plausible explanation for this? It's not ad hoc to say that we have a soul that can go out of the body, because Christians have been saying that all along. But to say precognition as a response to what the experiencers think is an out-of-body experience that sometimes has evidential pieces, like knowing what happened when they were without brainwave activity, no heart rate, what was happening in another room, that sort of thing. I think it's kind of like saying, I'll say this, I think it's kind of like to say that, well, look at all of these cases where people didn't have those experiences. Doesn't that mean that since that outweighs the other, that means that there's nothing?
No, that wasn't my point.
Okay, well, then make your point then. Let me just finish this. What I was going to say was, that's a bit like if we're all wondering whether Australia exists. You say, well, there's a billion people that have never been to Australia. Well, okay, but if one person really has, then Australia exists. And, that's kind
of course, I agree. Yeah. But the thing is that by your own admission, the reason why the disembodied soul explanation comes so naturally to you is because it's been believed by many Christians for many years. But so what? Just because that doesn't make it the most intuitive and likeliest explanation. And especially
not ad hoc.
Well, I'm not sure that okay, fine. But anytime
that was my criticism, was that it was ad hoc to say precognition there.
Anytime you assume that a traditional answer to explain a phenomenon is the right one, and you ask somebody who doesn't hold that position to explain it, by definition, they're going to have to offer an explanation that seems ad hoc, because they're offering an alternative explanation to the one that comes naturally to people who have been so informed by tradition. That doesn't mean much. But meanwhile, hold on, let me now for a moment, because souls are not three-dimensional things in three-dimensional space. So while it's true that Christians have believed for 2,000 years that humans have souls that go to Hades or whatever when they die, it's not true that they've thought that disembodied in mass that disembodied souls can float around in three-dimensional created space-time and look down from a height above. This is all stuff that is far more akin to pagan views of a disembodied state.
Wait. First of all, I don't hold the position, Chris, just because the tradition is.
I know you don't.
My point there was
don't.
about that's what makes it not ad hoc. Okay, that's just one thing.
I
Okay,
understand.
and that was my point. Actually, I think it makes much more sense of my beliefs about the soul that have to do with the continuity of experience and all that sort of thing.
Sure.
But at the same time, this idea that floating around and all of that sort of thing, are you really telling me you don't think that the history of the church, the predominant view has been that there can be that you have a soul that can be in some sense independent of your body?
No, but independent from your body is consistent with it going to Hades until the resurrection. But here you're leaning upon near-death experiences in which the soul doesn't go to Hades and instead just remains on Earth and is able to see physical things with non-physical spiritual soul eyes or something like that. You're talking about a view of the soul when it becomes disembodied that is utterly foreign to the Christian documents and the Christian tradition.
Well, this all goes back to, Chris, whether or not there are evidential cases of that. And I'm asking you, are you rejecting that there are evidential cases of NDEs, or would you say, no, I think those things really are happening and those people are in some cases experiencing those things. I just think that remote viewing or precognition is a better explanation.
No, I'm saying that there are all sorts of explanations that may account for the phenomena that is described. One of those explanations is the one born from 2,000 or almost 2,000 years of Christian dualism, but it departs from that dualism by saying that these souls are in three-dimensional space rather than in Hades, able to look down from above in three-dimensional space. It departs from the Christian tradition in that regard. And meanwhile, there are other possible explanations that will sound ad hoc to someone who assumes that the likeliest explanation is a weird departure from Christian tradition.
Well, wait a minute. What I think is ad hoc is not physicalism. That's already.
I know you're talking about the possible explanations I might offer for
talking about precognition, but take ad hoc off the table. Then forget that.
Mm-hmm.
The other explanations, do they account for the evidential claims like knowing about things in other parts of the hospital or on the roof of the hospital?
Yeah,
or
of course. Precognition is a good example of that.
So sorry.
Yeah, of course. Precognition is a perfect example of that. It's possible that it's possible that the brain is far more complex than we think it is. In fact, it's guaranteed to be far more complex than we have any possible understanding of it. And it's possible that in the final moments of death, the way that the neurons start firing crazily means that they're able to get pictures of and get knowledge of things that happen in the future shortly after their death and in other parts of the nearby area. And that's what they recall when they wake up on the other side, not actually being awake and active during that time. Or remembering what information they gained while in the throes of death.
Wait, so are you saying this happens naturally?
I think it very well may. Yeah, absolutely.
So someone could put together information and their brain can kind of work it out that there is, say, a shoe on the roof of the hospital, or what someone's family is doing at home with specificity, like what they're listening to on the radio, what toys they're playing with.
I think it's possible, number one, that the precognition I'm talking about is in fact divine in origin and that God is giving it to them for some reason.
Okay.
That's possible.
Okay.
But yes, I also think it's possible that is what our brains are capable of, but rarely do we experience it, because rarely does any one of us find ourselves in the throes of death only to find ourselves coming back to life.
So yeah, but you think that's more plausible than what the people claim to have experienced?
I think that's one of many possible explanations for near-death
I believe it's possible. Yeah, I agree, it's possible.
Well, great. So then that's not very good evidence for dualism.
That's it doesn't. It means it's not like a Cartesian proof or something, but it doesn't mean it's not good evidence. If you're saying that explanation is not as plausible as someone going out of their body, then yeah, I'd say that's a relevant point to consider.
I do think that there are problems with the assumption that comes naturally to somebody like you after 2,000 years almost of Christian tradition of dualism. I do think there are problems with thinking that that's the clearest, most likely, most intuitive view, when doing so has to depart from that very tradition. Because in order for a disembodied soul to look down on a scene and see a shoe in some other part of the area, their soul has not in fact gone to Hades, like souls do when people die.
It's a near-death experience, right?
No. You're talking about a post-death experience. You're talking about a post-death, pre-resurrection or pre-resuscitation experience.
Yes, pre-resuscitation. Yes,
pre-resuscitation, but not pre-death, not near death. It's post-death.
Well, this is the whole point, is it's on the line, and with modern technology, it's very difficult to know exactly where that line is. But their body is in a state that is very death-like. I don't know at what point.
Okay, all the more of a problem for your view, since we don't have any evidence in Scripture that it's even remotely common for a soul to become not only disembodied from a living person, but to remain on Earth able to see physical things without physical eyes.
Well, but back up a second. You just admitted, you said that I see this as more intuitive because I have a history of tradition behind all that. And I think that's probably true. I'll admit that. Nevertheless, you just said yourself that the suggestion you made about the brain precogging all of this is less plausible than what I'm saying.
I never said that. What I said is I wasn't contending it was more plausible.
Oh,
so
okay. Yeah. Then yeah.
So
okay, fine. That's fair.
You guys can have your own debate, I guess. In the meantime, I'll convince Braxton.
I won't want to have that debate, just to be clear, because for me, I just care what the Scripture says. And whenever people want to argue for dualism, they want to go everywhere but Scripture. But anyway.
Well, I don't think that's fair. I think there are a lot of people who've argued dualism from Scripture. My point here is just that you can't wave off a third of the arguments that were brought from the other team, and you haven't waved them off. You guys answered them, but I'm saying that's a part of the debate.
I never said it wasn't part of the debate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
I feel like a lot of those things have been avoided because I do think that their explanations aren't very good on like, I don't think precognition gets you very far here. I don't want to get too into it. I think there are a lot of philosophical problems with what you just said. And also I think that you're going to have a really hard time explaining the incarnation. We can talk about that at another time. I think physicalism makes a mess of the incarnation, which is the central claim of Christianity. There's going to be a lot of issues there. And philosophy of mind, I think physicalism is incoherent.
This has never been a debate about physicalism, so that's interesting but completely irrelevant.
Yeah, I know. I get it, but I think that's been avoided is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and actually, I ended up bringing us into this realm right now. But as you're nodding your head, Chris, the reality is, I said I had hoped that it would go more in that direction, and then the conversation began. Right. So once you're asking me questions, I kind of have to respond. So, but here we are, and we made it to the end, and I hope that everyone feels like they got to say what they wanted to say.